order. Trophy Club Mud 1 District Meeting. We have a quorum. We have Director Castaway, President Wilson, and Vice President Rose. Citizens' comments. This is opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it's posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action or discuss any comments made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear comments on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 4 minutes or the time limit determined by the president or presiding officer. To speak during the item, you must complete the speaker's form that includes the topics of your statement. Citizen comments should be limited to matters over which the board has authority. Are there any citizens' comments?
No.
Hearing none, we'll proceed into the public hearing. Item number 1, Trophy Club Municipal Utility District 1 will conduct a public hearing regarding adoption of final tax rates for tax year 2018.
Open it at a time.
The public hearing is open at 6:35. Staff?
The staff really has no presentation on this point. It's my understanding it's open public hearing, and we're looking for citizen comments regarding the tax rates that have been published in the newspaper as appropriate for a MUD. So if there's anyone interested in making comment about those tax rates, please step to the microphone.
Haven't seen none. We will close the public hearing at 6:36, and we will proceed into the consent agenda. All matters listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Considering to take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, the August 2018 check register. B, the August 20th, 2018 regular meeting minutes. Are there any items that anyone would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll move to approve the consent agenda as posted.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Director Castaway. All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move into regular session. Item number 3, receive report from District Rate Consultant regarding proposed water and sewer rate recommendations.
Well, good evening. Again, Chris Eckert with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Here to make just a few recommendations with regards to your rates coming into the next fiscal year. Going to start tonight with sewer rates and then move on to water rates. As we look at your sewer rates going into next year, there is a slight under recovery of about $125,000. It's about 3.6% as we look at what your revenues are, what your current rates are producing now versus what you need in the next fiscal year. As some of you know, the district did go through a protest of their rates, and coming out of that protest was a process by which we set wastewater rates. And so we have followed that same process. You can see that process on this screen. I won't go through all of the numbers here. But effectively, what we do is we allocate revenue between residential customers and commercial customers. We take the volumetric revenue requirement and we allocate it between those customers. And so as we look into next year, you can see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, in the volumetric revenue requirement for residential needs to produce about 1.68 million in the volume portion of the rate, commercial about 0.617. The rates needed to produce that, you can see here on the screen right now. One thing I will note in working with staff, we have done a $1 increase in the base charge, taking that from 1960 up to 2060. That is the same for both customer groups. For your commercial customers, in order to produce their required revenue, the increase is going from $5.92 to $6.30. Again, as you know, on the commercial side, the volumetric rate is applied to all volumes. That's not done on a winter average. On the residential side, we do use a winter average, and we run that through the rate blocks that you see on the screen. At the bottom part of this slide, you see what we're recommending for an increase in the residential volumetric rates, increases within each block. So what does this mean to a customer? On this slide here, you see what this does for a residential customer. Again, this is a winter average of either 5,000, 10,000, and so forth and so on, as you see in the far left-hand column. So for a customer with a 5,000-gallon winter average, it'd be a $1.33 a month increase. 16,500, that's at the middle there, 289. That's a very large winter average as you get up to the top portions there. Specific to commercial customers, that's what you see on the screen now. For a 10,000-gallon commercial customer, it'd be $4.80 a month. We did put the class average on there. That's 76,000 gallons. What that is just taking all of the class volumes divided by all of the class connections. That's where we get the 76,000 gallons. If somebody was using that average every month, that would be an increase of $29.88. Before I move on to water, does anybody have any questions on wastewater I can answer?
Just for clarification, Chris, so last year, when I had just arrived, we had a situation where wastewater was under-recovering as a whole.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, the additional revenue needed to let wastewater pay for wastewater as a holistic concept was on the order of 24% rate increase or revenue increase overall.
Sir.
The board at that time chose to say, well, let's run it up about 12% and let water subsidize sewer by the other 12% for this past year. We've gone through several changes and had several things happen in the past years, but the rate increase that you've proposed here both fixes the equity between the residential rate class and the commercial rate class, as well as making sure that sewer revenue accomplished under this proposal actually pays for itself. So there's no subsidy from the water side of the bill to the wastewater side of the bill.
That's correct. This brings sewer even, where sewer is paying for sewer and then water is paying for water. And again, as you did point out, we have followed this method, this sewer method, that has been agreed to by the board and the ratepayers. And under that, we are allocating costs between residential and commercial customers so that they pay their equitable share.
All right, thank you.
Chris, just to be really clear, you started off by saying wastewater under recovery 1.25, $125,000.
Yes, sir.
And this rate adjustment corrects that, correct?
Yes,
That
sir.
was carried. Okay, got it.
All right.
Does the revenue requirement for sewer include any projected debt service, either of this fiscal year or future fiscal year?
There is a debt service in there. Did we put in 400,000 in for the debt?
Yeah, well, there is the debt service, 400,000, but split between water and wastewater.
Right.
So there's a percentage here. I can pull the budget here and get the actual percentage, but there is a percentage of that 400,000 that goes towards wastewater.
Yeah, so we have captured that within the rates going forward.
Part two of my question.
Oh, okay.
Towards Andrew in a minute.
All right, moving on very quickly to water. Water is in good shape, just as it was last year. And so presenting two options to you as we look at water going forward into next year. Option one would be no change, keep rates as they are right now. Another option, as I visited with your staff, was to potentially increase the fixed charge on water for a 5/8 inch meter by $1. And then have commensurate increases with the other meter charges as they increase. The concept here is we always need to be aware of and ready to replace our infrastructure that's in the ground right now. And so as we go forward, it is prudent to plan. It's prudent to have money set aside and be able to have the cash on hand to make those improvements that are needed as they come due. And so again, with this $1 increase in the meter charge and then commensurate increases with the other size meters, that would produce about $88,000 on the water side over the year. So again, setting aside a little bit more money here for those repair and replacements as they come due. And that's the rate that you see here on the screen right now. Again, for a 5/8 inch meter, proposing a $1 increase going from $17.15 to $18.15. Keeping the ratios between the 5/8 inch meter and the other meters constant as they exist right now. And so that would be $1.88 for a 1 inch meter, so forth and so on, as you move through the different meter sizes. About 98% of the meters on your system are 1 inch and less. So you're not impacting a large number of customers as you get to 1.5 and above. But those are going to be your commercial customers, your schools, people like that that have those larger meters. So again, not a necessary increase, but one that we feel is financially prudent going forward, is a very good idea for the district to plan for the future. Any questions on water? Yes, sir.
I have a quick question on the slide prior to this one. Option 1, we're talking sewer, total revenue increase from sewer. We're not bringing anything in from sewer, are we? We're just not sending it out? Is that what we're saying?
That is correct. All I'm trying to do there is give you an idea of what the revenue increases were. So option 1 on water, you would not produce any additional revenue, but you would be producing $125,000 additional on sewer. So
Because sewer
Sewer is paying
took care
for
of it.
sewer.
Sewer's
Yes,
paying
sir.
for sewer. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I see what, okay. I understand the slide. Thank you.
I guess the one question I would have is, we're essentially saying we're doing this to increase our reserve. So the question I would have is, currently, what's our reserve policy, as I understand it, and this is probably more to staff and less to you. Currently, our reserve policy, as I understand, is 50% of the highest revenue over the past 3 years.
Right, the highest O&M budget, which we consider to be both the O&M budget, PAYGO capital, and debt service, as it's defined in the previous policies set in 2015.
Yeah. And so, for giggles and grins, just to make it simple, we're gonna say that's about $10 million. Would that be pretty accurate?
Correct. This year would be the highest slightly. It's at 10.3. So overall, we're looking at, for 50%, 5.12 is what we're looking at.
Okay.
4.15.
What's our existing reserve amount right now? Because within our budget, we set aside $200,000 on the water side for reserve. We have another $200,000 on the sewer side. If we go with option 1, we're correcting the funding on the sewer side, where the water side was funding the sewer side,
Subsidizing.
subsidizing it. But there was a pretty significant over recovery on the water side already in order to subsidize that, plus have additional funds available. And so the concern I have is that by doing this, we're stating that we're doing a reserve of 400,000, but in reality, we're doing twice that number, 800,000, because the way water was last year, we were over recovering. I think it was planned for like 500,000 or 600,000. It was pretty significant. It was several $100,000. And so I'd be really interested in understanding how much, based on our budget, will water over recover, and then look at that number plus what we're already doing, and then I'd like to know that information.
Sure. So I went back and looked at the last several fiscal years, kind of went back to 15, kind of look at what we've been tracking on the side and what's available in cash. Now we have money kind of moved in different places. Some of it's title reserves, like a debt reserve, which we have to stay aside. It's assigned. We can't touch it. It does go towards the revenue bonds. But actually true reserves, in our reserve count, we have 982,000. And that's just what's pulling, and we've been doing that since 16. That's pulling, now recently, we're pulling 200,000 from water, 200,000 from wastewater. Last year, we had a good year as far as revenue and expenses went. So we increased it last year. So we're looking at roughly 4.3 is what we're looking at right now.
4.3 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Collectively. Now, that was we need to get to 5.2. How quick we want to get to that point is kind of where we're at, but that's where we're projecting to go.
Okay, so how much are we going to, so we're going to do 200,000, we're gonna do 400,000 just through our normal reserve.
Correct.
So if we're sitting at 4.3, that would put us at 4.7.
Correct.
How much are we scheduled to over recover on the water side if we leave the water rates flat?
212,000.
So then that would take us from 4.7 to 4.9. So we're roughly 200,000 from our target.
Yes, sir.
Now, some of this has to get pulled out also. For instance, we have GASB and stuff. We have things that we're having to take care of right now. That beginning of the fiscal year, we're going to have to pull money aside. So we do have to get prepared. We also have the overrun from the wastewater treatment plant that we're currently paying out of our general fund or reserve fund, however you want to look at it. That's roughly 680,000 right now that's coming out of our account that's being covered for there. We are planning on getting reimbursed back once the bond does go through, but that could be 6 months or whatever the time frame we're looking at. We're currently also paying for the 16-inch water line going forward right now as we're moving along until that bond comes through. So things to look at, our revenue source will not start coming in until the end of the calendar year. We start getting taxes, then our actual water revenue will come in obviously around the summer or heavier time. So, as far as what we're looking at, it depends on how much you want to have in the operating fund sitting there, as far as what kind of number you want. 50%, do you want to have 50% sitting there? We're getting there. We're approaching the 50%, yes. But some of it's being spent out in different places right now, so that's not what's going to be sitting there, as of, say, November of next year. We're not going to have that right away until
Right.
things are reserved.
There's amount of those funds that are working capital.
Right.
Because there's a period of time, as you mentioned, where there's gonna be more money going out than will be coming in.
That's correct.
But when we hit May, June, July, August, then we'll have far more coming in than's going out. So I'm looking at this more from at the end of the fiscal year. All of those funds that you mentioned, the wastewater treatment plant, we will have refunded ourselves back that $700,000, and a majority of that is probably already spent. So the impact of that is really already reflected in our account.
Well, we still have the retainage that has to be paid, which is 684,000 and some change there. So that will have to be spent out too. Other than the retainage, I think there's another 100 and something thousand. So you're looking about another 700,000, give or take, just for that overage right now, or the overrun
Okay.
right now.
And so I guess the one thing that I hear is that we have this amount, it's going to be reduced as we go through the first 4, 5, 6 months where the revenue is not gonna come in to cover it, and then we're going to refund ourselves back. Based on our budget, what do you estimate that amount being? Let's say if our budget hit perfect, we've never done it before, so I'll put that on the record. I have no expectations that everything will equal the way we're planning it. But if everything went according to plan, how much would we add from that 4.3? How much will we add to that 4.3 after the end of this fiscal year, if things go to plan?
At the end of this fiscal year?
Yeah, at the end of this fiscal year, based on the current budget we're looking at.
Well, we have, it all depends on the expenses. We tracked it, and the expenses versus the revenue is going out right now. Now, obviously September kind of being a wet time, and we don't know what the true-up's going to be for Fort Worth, which we know we have a pretty good-sized true-up coming in. I think we've hit peak a couple times this last summer. But realistically, I was trying to project out what would 19 look like if we went ahead and did this, went forward without the water. And just if everything goes according to plan, going to the end of next fiscal year, I'm looking at 5.3. This is all hypothetical numbers.
No, it's all hypothetical. We can only talk about
5.3 of next year at the end of next year is what I've kind of tracked and what I'm looking at. But
Okay.
that's things coming back in, that's things kind of settling out, and what we're looking at the end of next fiscal year.
Okay.
That's with option one.
That's
just
with
no,
option
that's
one.
with well, yeah. In my budget, I call it option 2 is what I call it. But yes,
But
that's with
your-
just doing the sewer.
Your option 2 is equal to our option 1.
That's correct.
Which is
That's correct.
only
Just the sewer.
Not subsidizing for the sewer. Vice President Rose, did you have a question?
I have a comment. The entire previous discussion was predicated on the current reserve policy at 50%. I was present for the discussion, sat in the audience seats for that discussion. That 50%, I'll be very kind, was a number that was thrown against the wall without any discussion on any amplification of justification. When the board came in, the number was to be 100%. Director Hayes, as they made the motion, said, I've reconsidered this. I think 50% may be an adequate number. We'd ought to go for it over 5 years. Made that motion. It was seconded. It was unanimously approved, and that was the discussion on the reserve. We have on the agenda tonight a discussion on a reserve policy. I will tell you that I have absolutely no idea what the right number is for our reserve. 5.3, 50%, could be strong, it could be weak. And until we adequately resolve the reserve policy question, I don't think that I can't get to 50%. I can't justify it.
Just one comment, I'm gonna ask Andrew to step up if he doesn't mind, that from a bond sale perspective, the market expects to see certain reserve funds, and it will help your rating for purposes of the sale of bonds and securing the best rates possible. So I think it's pretty relevant to this discussion.
Absolutely, and I will go through this in more detail. This does not, the sheet I handed out does not include what I'm about to brief you on, because I got the criteria from Standard & Poor's, one of the 2 rating agencies that we would look to use at a bond sale. As I discussed with Carmen and with Stephen last week, perhaps we should use that as part of our guide in determining what reserve level is appropriate, because certainly they're going to have an opinion and determine our credit rating based upon that. And so what I received from Standard & Poor's yesterday was their 44-page criteria that they look at, and one of those things is district liquidity. And they have a matrix where they're balancing all number of different factors for the district to come up, and we currently have a AA- credit rating, one of the strongest credit ratings a MUD has in the state. That criteria, and there is no clear-cut answer for this, but they look at days cash on hand instead of looking at your just unencumbered fund balance. They're looking at days cash on hand. The most they'll consider is 150 days cash on hand. They also weigh that against just a bottom line number of a reserve level. And so they weigh both of those things in a matrix. A number around $5 million in terms of unencumbered fund balance and having 150 days cash on hand would get us to the second highest rating in that category for liquidity. What those numbers crunch out to, I don't know off the top of my head because we haven't examined it. But I'm certainly happy, and I think I've shared that criteria report. Haven't been able to review it with Carmen and with Stephen yet, but that's something that I think you all should take into consideration as you put this policy together. Because to say that you need 50% of your operating expenditures may be correct, but there is more to it as the rating agencies look at it, and frankly, gearing your strategy towards the rating agencies is likely to best serve the district overall, because they've come up with that criteria in a very purposeful way, and they're looking at MUDs not only in Texas but across the country. So that could be a good guide.
I've seen, as I've worked on this reserve policy and put it together, I've seen a couple of different things, or actually more than one. One was the flat-out cash amount, but one of the things I think it came from AWWA was or maybe it was GFOA, talking about a 45 to 90-day reserve amount. But then the other thing they get into is something that's particularly designated toward debt and bonds, and it talks about 120% of your annual payment. And I was looking at one organization where they had changed that and gone to 150% to improve their bond rating.
We have a debt service reserve
Yep,
covenant with all of our bonds that we have to maintain. That is the average annual debt service of those outstanding bonds. With reference to having 120 or 150% of that set aside for bond funds, happy to research it and get back with you. That's not something that I'm particularly aware of at this
Okay.
moment, and not something that I've been aware of in rating calls with the rating agencies. As we view it, we've got a bond reserve fund that we have to build and maintain over the life of those bonds. Having more than that in your INS fund, I don't think is a meaningful use of your money and your fund position, because once it's set aside for that, you're really restricted. But it's certainly something that I'm happy to look into and see what that is an exact reference to.
Yeah. I guess I would say this, if we look at 150 days out of 365 days, that roughly comes up to be about 41%. That's an overly simplistic way to do it. I think if you, and whether we like it or not, the 50%, regardless of how they came up with it, that's the number we have until we change it. I don't think we have the information here to actually change our policy. We'll have that debate later on, but to now, we have to make this decision based on the information that we have. And I don't think we're gonna come to a final reserve policy tonight. And this can't wait until we do that, so at this point, it's kind of here nor there. So, anyway, I thank you, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Chris?
That's really all I have. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
One final question, I'm sorry, and maybe for both of you, which is, in order to proceed with the issuance of the additional bonds, we need to meet the 1.25 coverage test. As part of your analysis, have we confirmed we've got a sufficient revenue stream to meet that test?
Again, this was something that I visited with Stephen about the pro forma that we put together in order to submit an application to the TCEQ. Based on our 2018 budget, we were showing that coverage. Once we have wrap up this fiscal year here in a couple of weeks, my intention is to update that pro forma, ensure that we are in that position, and then this upcoming debt issuance, as I understood it, is incorporated into these rate considerations that Mr. Eckert's making, so that this current budget, or this budget that you're adopting, has this bond issuance already built in once we get that TCEQ approval and can move forward.
All right. There any other questions for Chris Eckert? Okay. Next item, number 4, receive report from District Financial Advisor regarding outstanding district debt, issuance of proposed revenue bonds, debt service funding obligation, future capital improvement project financing, and general district financial recommendations.
Well, good evening, and I may have neglected to introduce myself when I came up a moment ago. I'm Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets, work as your financial advisor to the MUD. As some of you are aware, we've been working on this project and its funding for going on probably 2 years now. As it stands, the TCEQ is reviewing the application. They've deemed that they've received it and it's administratively complete, and now they're in the review process. Exactly when we'll receive their approval that would allow us to then move forward with the financing is a bit unclear. It could be as soon as 60 days. I'm not sure of exactly if anybody has a better idea of when we may receive that approval. But once we do receive that approval, it'll be time for the board and staff to come to a determination about how quickly and how much we need to borrow in order to complete our project and cost overruns from the wastewater treatment plant. What we're considering here, because we were turned down by the voters at a bond election, is for a revenue bond. The revenue bonds, and we have some outstanding already, these would be issued what is known as on parity with them. We'll have a rate covenant that we have to maintain in terms of our utility rates, and then we'll have to meet an additional bonds test in order to issue these bonds, both of which we meet at this moment, but we'll need and will likely require the 2018 completed audit in order to take this to market. That depends a little bit on when we receive that TCEQ approval. We have to have our audit filed with our bond investors within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year. So depending on how the timing of this works out, we may need to have that 2018 audit in hand, but those are just some of the moving pieces that we'll be kind of keeping up with and considering as we move forward. In terms of how quickly this can move forward, once we receive that TCEQ approval, it's roughly 3 months from the time we receive that TCEQ approval. Assuming the board wants to move forward immediately with issuing revenue bonds, it'd be 90 days until the funds are received by the district and ready to be spent out of your own bank account. We would be doing this in the public bond market, which is a little bit different than the last financing we did that went through the Texas Water Development Board SWIFT program. Because of the need for capital, or the more immediate need for capital, the plan to this point has not been to go to the Texas Water Development Board, but to sell in the public bond market and sell traditional revenue bonds. Will get rated by Standard & Poor's. I would expect to maintain our AA- credit rating. There hasn't been any drastic changes in our financial position, or certainly deterioration in our financial position, as they monitor us on a regular basis, regardless of whether we issue debt or not. And so that would be my expectation. As we look at that and as we plan for this over the last year, we ran the pro forma at 5% interest rate. That's well above market right now. There is no telling, obviously, where interest rates will be 6 months from now or 4 months from now. Today, I believe we'd be in the 4.25% range for 30-year revenue bonds that we're considering. So I think that our financial pro forma is still in line and hopefully conservative, and hopefully that'll prove out. We don't have an expectations that interest rates are going to skyrocket from here, but headline risk and everything else that's out there, there's really no telling. The Fed will continue to raise interest rates, or they've indicated that they will, and that's continued to trend the municipal market higher, but we're still hovering the 10-year Treasury bond below 3%. And so I expect we'll be somewhere around this 4.25% range here for the next few months, and don't expect any surprises, but you never know. Carmen, is there anything that I'm forgetting to mention, or that you'd like
Well,
to go
we,
into more
you know, we
detail?
have a lot of ground to cover there for sure. So in our discussion in the conference call, I guess that was maybe 10 days ago, and we talked about kind of the competing interests. So the application that we submitted to TCEQ was for a not to exceed bond amount that reflected both wastewater side of the house costs and water side of the house costs. The bulk of it, let's say it's a 7.2 million total, it was about 1.2-ish is what I recall for the wastewater side, which would go to fund basically to amortize, the way I'm describing it, to amortize the wastewater plant project overrun of about $1 million. So we've spent out the original $14,995,000 that was picked up in, I want to say that was, let's say December of 15, January of 16. I could be off by a year there. We've expended those funds. We added another $332,000 in the PAYGO capital budget of last year. And then ultimately, we'd like to refund ourselves for that. The money that's going out to the wastewater plant project right now is coming out of reserves. That's where we're at. So we've got we're burning that cash right now. And we would plan to reimburse ourselves sometime in the future. The final design for the water pipeline is anticipated in January, with really an earliest bid date of, say, March. As we get closer to final design, we've seen a trend of the cost estimates coming down as they are more clear on the design aspects and the cost estimation. That original cost that they proposed at, say, $6 million is down to around 4.5. I personally believe that's going to come down even farther as they get close to 100% design. So, all of that's happening where we have an immediate need. We're using up reserves right now in anticipation of a future bond issue. But the bulk of that bond issue would go to a project that's going to happen at the earliest. We'll start to spend money on it in March. Overall, we've seen the Fed with a upward sort of pressure on 10-year treasuries, and that seems to be kind of one of the guideposts for bond interest rates, even for 30-year bonds, as what the Fed is doing. So recently, for a decade, it seems like, since 2008 and the economic disaster that came from the CDO debacle in the bond market, the Fed rate's been effectively flat. It's basically zero. Now, out of what they called inflation concerns, there's been a few interest rate bumps. Based on your outlook, I would think that it's in the district's best interest to remain flexible on when that bond gets issued. And we want to also be flexible in case there's a short-term spike in interest rates to say, we're not going to issue bonds this week because there's this spike. Let's put it off for a month and see if we can get a better interest rate. So what are you looking at for the kind of long-term, 6-month to 1-year horizon on interest rates in the bond market?
I could see interest rates going up between now and 6 months, another 25 basis points. But there's no telling if Trump calls for even more tariffs and investors get skittish, that could drive yields substantially higher. That's really part of the unknown. If the status quo were to remain, I'd expect interest rates to be trending. That happened a little earlier ago.
They just sent an announcement that $200 billion new tariffs against China.
All of those could drive interest rates higher. In 2008 and through 2010, I was at a large investment bank, and their economists kept saying that the Federal Reserve's going to start hiking rates in the next 3 quarters. Well, finally, 8 years later, those leading economists were right. And so it's kind of taught me that you may believe that interest rates are going up, but you'll only be proven right or wrong. From what I've seen and really where it looks like the 10-year Treasury bond's been, I'd expect it to go up maybe 25 basis points unless there is some sort of event that pushes them up higher. The last event was Donald Trump being elected president. The 10-year Treasury bond spiked 75 basis points in 4 weeks. That was the last major movement that we saw of in the Treasury market, in the municipal market. But otherwise, it's been a pretty steady trend up. In terms of what this means for our project, we're depleting our reserves and trying to not issue more bonds than we need, waiting to get those bids in hand. It's a balancing act. Certainly, if we were to go out and borrow all $7.2 million and then only need $5.5 million, we would have money in our bank account that we couldn't spend without TCEQ approval. You can go back to the TCEQ and get them to approve that, and I don't believe that a bureaucratic headache, and certainly would take some time, but I think that we could get approved if you had projects that you wanted to tackle in addition to this. If we can wait, I think that it makes sense to sit on this bond issue until we have bids in hand and issue what we need. I personally don't believe in borrowing money just because it's cheap. For the last decade, we've been advising our clients, you borrow money when you need it, not because it's cheap or because you're trying to anticipate what the markets are going to do. And I would advise that today. But there are other considerations. If we're spending down and depleting our reserves and we need to rectify that, that's certainly a risk that we need to consider.
I do want to add, Andrew, if we can, we are budgeting in a payment of whatever the amount, the 7.2 at 30-year bond. There is potential if we wait long enough that we won't have a payment in next fiscal year also. That can come into play depending on what time we actually borrow the money.
How much are we, including in the budget?
400,000.
400,000?
So if we sold our bond issue in March, we could structure it to have a payment in either September 1st, or you could put that interest payment into March of 2020 before you make a first interest or principal payment. And so that could free up budgetary dollars. The most efficient thing to do would be to make your first interest payment within the first 7 or 8 months of your bond issue, but it's certainly not unheard of to push it. I think legally you can go 14 months without making a principal or interest payment on your debt obligation.
But if you do that, you're still accruing interest on that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you're paying.
Yes,
You're not paying, you're paying.
You are paying.
That's what I thought. Money's not free.
No.
Any other questions?
Did I cover everything, Carmen? And we talked about a lot
I
last
know.
week, and I've
And it's mostly because I have a brevity impairment, which everyone's aware of. So I appreciate your time, and, for me, this discussion is really important because I don't really want to go out and borrow the full amount and then find out there's $2 million that we either have to apply for a different way to spend through TCEQ. My preference would be to really kind of wait until we've got bids with, reasonable contingencies on that project, so we have a kind of final amount. I think by then we'll certainly know what the overrun total is on the wastewater facility, and we should be able to borrow just what we need as a concept. It does point to the value of having a robust reserve, and it's really why the staff is advocating for what I call option 3, but option 2 on the slides that Chris presented. I believe that this is a time where having that money here allows us to make the right choice about the timing of that bond issue.
absolutely. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
And it was a pleasure to meet you in person finally.
Item number 5, consider and take appropriate action to approve resolution number 2018-09178, amending fiscal year 2018 budget. Which one of you gentlemen will
This is probably Stevens.
Hold up here. All right, as we got the right attachment here. All right, so as we get closer, we'll go ahead and pull it. That's on page 22 of the packet. So I have on here everything that's different from, and I don't know if you want me to go line item by line item as far as the difference or just the overall. It's, as you can see, the net is fairly small compared to our budget here. We just wanted to kind of consolidate everything and kind of show what we were projecting for this year. And we get to the bottom.
Stephen, while you're on page 22, would you explain the interfund transfer in that 1.8?
I would love to. So, I have been on the phone with Rod, our auditor. So the interfund transfer, the reason why it kind of sticks out quite a bit like that, as you guys are fairly familiar with the SWIFT bond, we projected to have the $260,000 coming back. It's actually 257 and some change coming back from a due from the phase 2 part of the NS2 project with Fort Worth. What we weren't predicting is to actually be able to get the 800 or 799,000 back also from that phase 1 part of the project. Luckily, the bid came in under. We had enough in the SWIFT loan where we were able to reimburse ourselves back for that money also. So this is actually transferring the money from one account to another account. So I want to make sure I showed every breadcrumb of where this money came from. So it got transferred to two different accounts. I got on the phone with Rod. This will be corrected this next month. I actually overcomplicated. Basically, I made the revenue come in, made the revenue come back out. So I actually did one journal entry too much. So this will be fixed come next month, or this month technically. where it's going to show an actual revenue of the 800,000 versus just the in and out transfer.
Yeah, it was the balance of the lines going across, the 796 on the amendment, the difference, and then the year-to-date total, it was,
So you're on 22. Let me get to that page.
yeah.
here. So the 796, and what I'm trying to do is show that as a revenue source that we weren't predicting. If you actually look farther down, you're going to see I have that revenue go in and out. I need to take out the out part so it shows as a actual revenue.
744.
Yes.
I was wondering about that.
So
It's like,
it-
where
it
did
will-
the-
it will
where
be
did
fixed.
$750,000 go?
It will be fixed. It was a in and out transfer, so I talked to Rod just to make sure how I did that, and I will have to correct that end. I overcomplicated for that end. So it will show now an actual revenue source at 790.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the question he has, and apologize, I'm trying to speak for you, is in the year-to-date total for 8/31 is $1.8 million.
Yeah.
I think he's asking about that number.
Why isn't it 796?
Because that is showing, it's actually a transfer of I think 102. It's showing the 796 plus the 260 as a journal entry. That journal entry is going to be taken out. So it's just going to show the 796.
Okay, so my question now becomes, I have a resolution before me,
Yes.
and you're telling me we're gonna change it after I approve the resolution? Is that what you're telling me?
So I'm showing you right now that your year-to-date is going to change to 796, 145. I can't change the year-to-date. So what's actually going to show in that account is 796, 145, which I'm showing. And
Okay.
you see the 260 down below on 130 on the 2.4 reimbursement.
Just a minute. No.
It's the last line.
The last line right above the green.
Oh, I got the 260, yeah.
Okay. So this is the revenue source of both of those coming in. So I'm going to fix the journal entry. Your year-to-date is not going to be accurate, but what's actually in this column, which is being changed, is accurate.
I get you.
So the year-to-date really just shows what's in that account, but that's really not going to be,
So when
it's going to be a journal entry to fix that.
okay, so when I approve the budget amendment,
You're approving the column of the amended, not the
I'm
year-to-date.
approving column 18 budget adopted, 18 budget amended, and 18 budget difference,
Correct.
and that's all.
Correct.
Yeah, the year-to-date is.
The year-to-date is just for reference.
Correct.
Okay.
To
just
see
check.
what we're trying to do or what we're doing on here.
Okay, have to be clear.
Thank you.
I usually catch all my mistakes before they show up here, but I had to reach out to the auditor on that one.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm glad to see the electricity is down.
Yes. So as you see, it's a difference of a 3% surplus basically is what we're looking at, difference between the amended,
Essentially a net of
essentially net 3%.
345K.
Correct. On the plus.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2018-0917A, amending the fiscal year 2018 budget.
Okay, I have a motion to approve resolution 2018-0917A, amending the fiscal year 2018 budget. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, motion by Vice President Rose, seconded by Director Castaway. Are there any comments? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, consider and take appropriate action regarding the adoption of resolution number 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019.
I'll go ahead and take this one. So I want to start off first. We presented our last budget in the last meeting here. So the first sheet you're going to see is the fiscal year 19 amended proposed budget. Now this is without changing any rates at all. This is continue with the current rates that we projected on the last meeting. And then this is just the changes in some of the revenue and the expense side, so you can see the difference of what we're projecting now.
So that's what you're describing there is option one.
No, so what I'm describing here, yes, correct, it'd be option one, that's correct. Which is
Okay.
doing nothing with the rates, just showing the difference between this budget now versus after we fine-tuned the last budget we had the last meeting.
Okay. So option two would be the previous option one, which is correcting the under recovery on the sewer side.
Correct. The best thing probably to do is not look at the actual full budget yet, but just look at what changes we're gonna do in expenses and revenue, and then let's go into the option 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, that's fine.
That way, if anybody had any questions on this. So a few things stuck out here. Most of the changes came across is what we got with our broker for our insurance and benefits. Because we are a non-ERISA, we are being dropped from our current policy with Aetna, and they will not pick us up again this year. We had the same issue last year where they weren't gonna pick us up, but they wound up doing it. This year, we officially been dropped. So we are gonna have to reach out to a different insurance broker, or a different insurance company, and the rates will go up from there, from what we originally projected. So we are looking at about a 25% increase. I'll know, right now, they're only doing 12/1s policies right now, so they haven't gone out to the 1/1 yet. So I'm waiting to get official rates here. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we can narrow this down a little bit more as we go along. So you're gonna see some of these rate differences. We also made we filled a staff position. We filled the wastewater plant superintendent role, actually internally. So you're gonna see some ranges in salaries from moving somebody over from one department to the next department. And then there was a few increases so we can match up to the comp study that we had. There was a few positions that need to move up and change based on that. So this is where we are as far as the overall budget. Anybody have any questions or anything I need to go over line item wise?
A $10,000 increase in TCEQ permits and fees.
Yes, that'd be something Mike could speak more on.
We went from, between the two budgets, we went from 20,000 to 30,000, just down to curiosity. It's 135,60, 135,020. That probably is.
For the wastewater side.
It's on the wastewater,
Yep.
yeah.
That well may have been driven by me. I believe last year we had an $85,000 budget on that, at least on the wastewater side. It's 020, right?
Yes.
So we did have a large budget for that, and a big chunk of that was included to pay for legal fees associated with the protest of our discharge permit
Okay.
renewal.
Yep.
Then in the budget that you saw before this one, it had been cut down to 20,000. I felt like that was too far,
Okay,
and said we need to be probably more in that $30,000
Okay,
range
okay.
based on their rate making approach. So
okay.
I think I might be the one who
I think why we left that at
right here.
30,000 is because of
Yeah.
the UV disinfection that maybe we were
Right.
gonna try to challenge them on.
Right, and so there'd be some additional effort on our part. So one thing that's in our discharge permit right now is that all effluent
Yeah.
that comes from the wastewater plant has to be disinfected by the golf course before it's redistributed onto the grass. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, the water coming out of our wastewater plant is better quality than any wastewater plant I've ever seen in America. We went the whole month of May with like 5 bacteria colonies, and we're allowed 126 per milliliter. I mean,
Yeah.
so there is room with enough testing to get that requirement removed from our permit. It does involve convincing TCEQ that they're not,
That's the UV light treatment, right?
right. So that piece, but also just, when we pump the water to the golf course pond A, they're required to rechlorinate that before they distribute it through their system. To me, that seems like additional work that's not necessary, given the investment we have made in treatment technology at the wastewater plant. So
Okay.
I think it was really both of those elements.
I can remember, and I'm gonna kill a minute here. I can remember in the discussions on the design of the plant, about the UV treatment back in the design phase, about whether they're gonna be able to keep it, and if they, or get rid of it, and if they couldn't get rid of it, about the possibility of having to increase the size of it in order to get the capacity of the plant or something. But that's all
Right.
a long time ago. Thank you.
Stephen?
Was there any other questions on it, or can we go ahead and move into the actual budget?
Proceed.
All right, so we'll move on to the budget itself. All right, so I have everything labeled as option 1, 2, and 3. Option 1 is going to be do nothing with the rates, leave the rates they are currently now, and move on with the budget from there, from what we just saw, what we just proposed. Option 2 would be only to increase the sewer rates, dollar above the base, and do allocation for the residential and the commercial. And then option 3 is going to be doing the sewer plus the water and raising the dollar in the base rate with the equivalency factor that we have, you know, $1 for the 5/8 and 188 for the 1 inch and so on all the way through.
Okay, so let me clarify. So 1 is to leave them like they are now.
Correct.
2 would be just the sewer change.
Correct.
Which is collecting the net shortfall on the sewer side.
And doing the allocation, yeah, for the
And doing the
27,
allocation,
yeah,
that piece.
73, yeah.
3 would be the additional recovery on the water side.
That's correct.
Okay.
There you go. And there are your numbers.
So the differences are going to show you, there will be a surplus. The difference shows about 218,000 for the surplus. So anything, basically what we can do is anything over the surplus, we can move over to the reserve side and increase the reserves that we have for the water and the wastewater side. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to show that we were kind of pull the money out. I wanted to show exactly how much would be at the end of the day for the budget. And then going forward, we can, you know, if I'm pointed to, we can go ahead and move that over to the reserve side and increase the 400,000 to whatever the surplus is at that time.
Okay.
Was there any questions or anything?
I don't have any questions. I will tell you that I'm not an option 1 fan. I'm inclined to either option 2 or 3, and probably more inclined to option 3. And looking at the current year's budget and where it's fallen out with income versus expenses, I thought it was going to be a dry year. It looks like it's kind of balancing out, going to be a little bit short. And quite frankly, the income that we had from the Swift Bond area was a positive. Otherwise, I think we'd have been close to being on a losing side on the budget this year.
Correct. So I was kind of talking with Carmen. So I did some projections throughout this year. We started out very slow in the water side for the revenue sources, or consumption wise. Started out slow. We started catching up towards the beginning of the summer, but it looks like we're going to finish. It depends on how September finishes, but it's been a wet month so far. My projections, we're going to finish about 250,000 short on the revenue on the water side, which is roughly, I think, 12 million gallons, give or take. And I'll have to do the calculation, but short from what we projected for this year.
And I will tell you that I thought we were conservative when we set our anticipated sales for water last year.
So,
I
apologize.
I was looking forward to better result than where we were at. So, I mean, that's, my perspective is I'm still trying to build reserves, and so I'm inclined to option 3.
I have a question. If you remove the, and it may be somewhere, but I don't see an easy way to get to it. If you, let's assume the SWIFT reimbursement for phase 1 didn't occur. What do you estimate are where do you think we would end up if that didn't occur? If you had to project this last month?
As far as will we have an increase from last year?
Correct. Would we end up a positive or negative? And if so, your best guess on amount?
Well, I
Reach into
mean,
your crystal ball.
You can get that by going into the packet on on August's, sheet of expenses
But-
versus percentages.
Well, but those numbers don't come across on a consistent basis. There are things that's, for example,
Oh, I got you.
estimated
I
true
got
of
you.
those things.
Yeah,
So-
the things that happened in the last
I mean,
month that are not.
Correct.
do I think
that you have.
overall, I mean, our expenses, you know, one being short staff played a lot to do with it as far as having time to get everything done that we had budgeted to do. Our expenses were still relatively down compared to even if our revenue was low, our expenses were that much farther down.
And that's the good
And
news.
that's really what drove this. We would still be in the positive, obviously not near as much. But really, I think it comes down to having that ability to collect off the SWIFT loan, that 800,000, has been carrying us to basically just almost net out what we're having impact on the wastewater side, the wastewater treatment plant side.
Yeah.
That's really been a net almost
Yeah.
across the board.
So what do you guess that positive number would be? If you, what's your, and I realize it's an estimate, but
Right.
it's a 1 month estimate. Normally, we ask you to predict a year in advance, so
Right.
you ought to be really close to this one.
Really close to it. I mean, I still show it really comes down to what Fort Worth's true up's going to be. That worries me because I am not really sure exactly. I know we've been over, and Mike can contest to this. We've hit the peak a couple times. I think in July, I think it was. So that's really going to be a big factor on this. But obviously, as you go down in consumption, our cost in Fort Worth is going to be a little bit under projection. Also, naturally, it's going to come together. You know, we're going to be south of $1 million. I don't know exactly how much, but I still think somewhere around 800,000, give or take. I believe.
So even if we didn't have the reimbursement from the phase one, we would still be up 800,000.
Because,
a guesstimate.
It's a guesstimate. I mean, if you look at the year-to-date column over here and just kind of give you an idea, we're $2 million difference between the revenue and the expense side right now.
What page you on?
Just page 36.
Okay.
Go to the year-to-date and just look at the budget. And, I mean, with the revenue that we've collected year-to-date versus the expenses we paid out, we got one more month left. Most of our expenses we're pretty much capped out, I think, at this month as far as what's spending. There's still stuff out there that we're spending. There's still stuff that has to be moved around. But realistically, I mean, we're still going to be, I would say, 100. I mean, if you look at we're at 538,000 above right now from what we're projecting, but
So
we still got a month of revenue kind of coming in. Now, granted, most of the revenue's most of the revenue's come in already, besides a little bit of the water for one more month of it. But yeah, I still think crystal ball are about 800,000, give or take.
yeah, for people who can't see it, right now, 10,500,000 rounding is the revenue and 8.5 is the expenses. So right now, about a $2 million positive.
Correct.
And we expect that number could be cut in half or maybe a little bit more.
That number will be cut down because there's something that we spend at the end of the year that everything kind of gets
Yeah.
beveled at the end, and then if you're taking away some of the positive too, and most of the revenue has come in, so really we just have expenses that are going to make a move in this last
Yeah.
month. So,
Okay.
and we're still going to be in the plus, obviously not as much, you know. So I mean, if you take, I don't know how this month's really going to play around, obviously, because
Yeah, there's a
it's
lot
being
of-
wet right now.
Your crystal ball's a little cloudy, I understand. It's overcast.
I'm a finance guy. I don't like the what if gifts.
I don't even think we will get our Fort Worth true up till probably at the end of October, 1st November. And I don't know what you had on for September water sales either. Would you predict for that? 125?
Yeah, so we predicted or forecasted 125. Realistically, we're probably looking around 95 to 100 is what I'm
Yeah,
I'm
I
thinking.
haven't even sold 50 million, or
Yeah,
pumped
so-
50 million anyhow.
So we possibly could hit 100,000, give or take, but we're going to be short. And then the other driving factor is I did the calculation. Overall for the whole year, we're 30 connections short. Now, granted, that's not 30 total. That's just giving it from October all the way to now. And every single month, we're a total of 30 projections short. And we've corrected it this year. I think we over predicted the bigger meter counts than what we actually got in. So I looked at, and I got with Chris a little bit earlier, and talked to him about it too. So I think we kind of projected to have more meter count, a couple fiscal years, and kind of it rolled around each year as we went along. So we were a little bit more conservative this year as far as what the increase is going to be. We know we're getting close to build out. We're almost on that maintain phase now, then growing. So we kind of allocated, what percentage of the meters are actually going to be, the 5.81 inch versus the bigger ones. And that played a little bit of the factor in the revenue for the base rates.
Okay. I guess I would just say it's, given where we are with our reserves, regardless of what we think of that number or how it came up, it is what we operate to. I would have major concerns with raising funds in addition to what we already have. So, but that question will be answered here in the next 30 seconds. Is there any other questions or comments?
If I may, staff's recommendation is the third option, as you
Okay.
know. I think one other thing that's important to note in terms of what is unknown is we really don't have a really good look ahead at pipeline replacements over the next 5 to 10 years. Two projects that we have in next year's PAYGO capital budget, if you will, include an accurate inventory of our water and wastewater pipeline systems in a GIS database, as well as the implementation of a computerized maintenance management system that we have not had before. One of the elements that will come out of that is a projection of pipeline replacements. So these would be ordinary, in the neighborhood pipeline replacements that need to be done that aren't necessarily tied to a town road project, as an example. It's my belief, and it would be my recommendation, as long as I'm here, that the ordinary replacement of pipelines in neighborhoods, the things that run from 6 to, say, 10 inches, be done as PAYGO capital projects. We budget for them and we knock them out. Having adequate reserves for those kind of points is an important piece. I think when you're talking about, like Phoenix Drive, we did that as a joint project with the town this year. It was something that needed to be done, but at the end of the day, that was a PAYGO capital project. We're not financing it. We're not going out and borrowing money for those types of jobs. I really hope that one of the things that comes out of that is a solid game plan for both water and sewer pipeline replacements going forward. We do know that we've got some vulnerable AC pipe on the water side of the house in the older parts of Trophy Club that's very susceptible to main breaks. And we've seen one of those fairly recently that had large impacts. That said, one of the things we'll do in our GIS project is to take our main break history and plot it on a graph and say, you know what? That pipeline's broken 4 times in the last 10 years. We're going to recommend replacing that pipeline as opposed to just continuing to fix it. So it is an unknown. We really don't have that kind of future cash flow associated with pipeline replacements at this point in time, and need to get that GIS project in place to make reasonable recommendations. But in fact, we don't know what that cash flow need is. I appreciate that if we don't know what it is, why should we budget some money for it? But I do believe that we ought to go ahead and go with option 3.
Thank you. General Manager Carmen, any other questions or comments?
My concern is, I'm very leery about raising the prices, even if it's $1, but at the same time, we didn't raise prices last year, so I don't want to get hit in the future by having to double the prices, if that makes sense to our customers.
Rate smoothing.
Do what?
It's called rate smoothing.
Rate smoothing?
I mean, the
So-
honest truth is, the cost of goods go up each year. CPI, we looked at it. It's 3.5. It's gone from 3.9 down to 2.9. Kind of moved around, but every year the cost is going up. Fort Worth cost has gone up. We can't control that. Our natural cost for us to get water has gone up. Should we reflect that the same situation the other way too? as you know, as Ms. Cassaway was saying, is, you know, do we not change rates here for 2 years, basically no rate increase, and then all of a sudden next year we have to increase that rate increase where we can smooth it out a little bit more? I mean, water's not getting any cheaper for anybody.
So along those lines, Stephen, I think that roughly a third of our budget goes to Fort Worth on an average year for wholesale water. And that number, which is what, 3.5 million roughly, this coming year, is going up. I mean, the rate from Fort Worth is going up 3.6%, is that the right?
It went just shy of 4%. I think it's 3.8.
3.89, I think.
So that's on a third of our expenditure budget.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'm going to move to approve the budget. Got to get this, make sure I get the right resolution here. I move to adopt resolution number 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019 using option 3.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve Resolution 2018-0917B, approving budget for fiscal year 2019, option 3. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
That motion was seconded by Director Castaway. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. We have 2 in favor. All opposed, raise your hand. 1 opposed, Gregory Wilson. Director Castaway and Vice President Rose approved the motion. I declined it. Motion fails. Do we have another motion? Here, not hearing one, I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019, option 2. Do I have a second? Seeing none, there's no second, that motion fails. So,
I'll reintroduce my original motion. Maybe there'll be some discussion. I move to approve the budget, resolution number 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019 using option 3.
okay, we have a motion by Director Rose again, approving 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019, option 3. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It was seconded by Director Castaway. Do we have any commentary?
Yes, I think it's important that we take this step, basically because one is, as Director Castaway's talked about, is rate smoothing. We are going to have increased costs coming up. We're well aware of those, not only the water pipeline, but also the recovering the over expense of the wastewater treatment plant. We also, as the general manager said, we're now going to look seriously at developing a reserve policy that looks at our infrastructure and the deterioration of that infrastructure over the last 40 years, 45 years. And I think it's important that we have an adequate reserve. I won't call it robust, because until we get through all of the maturation to get a really good number about where we should be, like I said, I can't tell you whether 50% is a good number or a bad number. And it's about as, from my perspective, it's about as nebulous and unstructured as anything I've ever seen. And so for me, it's important to move in this direction. We looked at the rate structure, the additional cost per month I don't think that that's going to be a showstopper for anyone. I grant that that's an increase, but it has been a fair amount of time since we've had an increase. We do have additional costs coming in. We all know that Fort Worth, we've been told that Fort Worth is going to increase the rates underwater. So that and the additional fees for exceeding hourly rates and daily rates of use on the water, that's like a little penalty that Fort Worth likes to give to us. And I just look at it and go, I need to get this rate policy established so we can talk about rate stabilization. And once we get rate stabilization, then when you have a wet year or you have a wet year where you don't get the revenue in, it's not really a big problem. So, I mean, we're talking about the difference here of between 2 and 3 of $80,000.
Can you? I'm sorry, can you come forward and state your name, please, and your address?
My name is Luann Wing. Do you need anything else?
Your address?
Oh, okay, fine. I'm not, has anybody here read the TCEQ utility rules and regulations? Do you have any understanding of those rules and regulations? Yes. Anybody actually read that documentation? Yes. Yeah. Okay, in it talks about cash reserves. It talks about a lot of the terminology around the discussions that you're having today. And I'm hearing repeatedly that you don't necessarily have a good grasp of what your reserves should be. Obviously, you're grappling with the incompetence or negligence of the past board in terms of managing budgets and managing reserves, and you have to do some compensating for that. But I don't really, I guess I would question, have you taken the time to bring in somebody from TCEQ to help you better understand what the rules and regulations are, what the reserves should be, before you make these kinds of decisions?
Yeah, I would say the issue is it's not really something TCEQ could help us with. The problem is there's baseline information that we don't have. So we don't have an inventory of what we have in the ground, of the assets that we have, and if a depreciation schedule to say, based on this depreciation schedule, its estimated life, we anticipate we're going to have to replace this pipe in this time frame.
So you're saying that should be a separate capital project, which is fine, but even before you get to that, I'm still not getting the impression that you've got a good grasp of, you know, your budget, what your reserves should be, and so you're guesstimating, much like perhaps your last board members were. I sense a greater responsibility in terms of needing to reestablish reserves, but I'm not convinced you really understand what that should be. That's just, again, there seems to be a lot of guesstimating, and I'm thinking there are state rules and regulations which give you a foundation for what your baseline should be.
Let me make this comment, then I'll defer to Director Rose. If you look at what the bond agencies require for when you're going out for bonds, they want to, I've seen 25%. He mentioned 150 days cash, over 365 days, that's 41%. Ultimately, when you look at, and this is where I am, when I look at where we are versus the two requirements that we have, we're currently exceeding that, and we're going to go to amounts greater than that. We're going to be at 5.3. We're going to be sitting at 51, 52%. Ultimately, I think there is a desire, a need to make sure we have adequate reserves. I also think that we're taking people's money, and just because you can doesn't mean you should. And ultimately, we shouldn't just continue to take money if we don't know if we really need it. And I say that simply because it's not a matter of having someone come in and help us with information. the district itself has never made the proper investments, which we're doing this year, to gather the information to truly determine what we have, to figure out what our reserve amount should be. Even if they said it should be 30%, what matters is 30% of what number. And once you get that number, then you can equate that to a dollar amount and say, well, that number should be $5.8 million. So it's not simply just identifying it should be 20%. It could be 20%, but then it has to be 20% of what number. And that's what we don't have. We don't know what that number is.
Where are you going to source that expertise?
Well, it's not an expert. There is a project that we have that we're funding, or if this budget's approved, that will be in this project to actually do a inventory of our assets and look at the costs, their estimated life, the replacement costs, and then we can start to say, okay, this is what our liability sitting out within the district. And then we can come up and determine, okay, well, this is the amount of money we need to have set aside to ensure that we can meet that
Right.
liability.
But I'm kind of sensing, which I like, John, is that you're basically talking about separate capital projects for replacing, doing that analysis, but having separate capital projects which you can carefully track associated with what will end up being kind of a long-term phased,
Yes.
replacement. But before we even get to that, I'm just not convinced that the expertise resides necessarily in this body to get a grasp of what your reserves should be, addressing, straightening out, the issues that have happened in the past that resulted in having little or no reserve. I'm not hearing, I don't have a strong confidence level that the expertise is necessarily in this room to, establish what those reserves should be, and then relate that back to what your budget should be. So I guess my challenge would be, Tony, I'm assuming that you know Texas utility rules and regulations.
I do.
And I know that just from my reading on my iPhone, I see some baseline figures in terms of reserves. So hopefully you've read the rules and regulations and you're giving guidance to the MUD, and hopefully it makes sense in terms of where we find ourselves today with,
Yeah.
I guess, attempting to reconcile reserves. And
The-
on top of that, establishing a budget for next year.
The deliberation that's going on, I don't believe relates to the district's legal obligations or compliance with TCEQ rules. It is obligated to establish a budget. It's obligated to levy debt service taxes to pay its debt service. It's got rate covenants in terms of funding its obligations. There's no question with respect to that. The district's reserve fund for its revenue obligations is $864,000. What the board's deliberating is the policy deliberation of whether, with respect to future costs, that should be done through the collection of additional revenues this year in establishing a reserve fund versus issuing future debt in the future. And there's very differences of opinion, but it's not dictated by TCEQ rules. This is a policy deliberation by the board,
Okay, so there's no overarching.
No,
not as
I-
not as opposed to
State
this
body.
issue.
Okay.
I have been, we go to conventions, and TCEQ is present at those conventions. I attended one seminar at the convention where they talk specifically about rates. I heard nothing about TCEQ establishing any particular reserve requirement.
I think
And
it was
so-
10%,
Well,
page 35 of Reg 290.
10% would be their minimum?
Yeah, they're I think,
Okay,
the EQ regulation 291,
okay.
page 35, there's reference to that. But, so there's no, in other words, based on what happened, and I'm almost done, but based on what happened with the prior reserve situation, there was no state oversight or,
No, the district itself is subject to state oversight. The district has original rate jurisdiction, so in terms of securing TCEQ approval for any changes in rates, that's only done on an appellate basis if a protest is filed, but the board has original jurisdiction. A lot of the TCEQ rules that you may be referencing relate to investor-owned utilities and not political subdivisions.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So I guess my point is, I think the reserve amount that we have is sufficient, given the information that we have. And until we can determine that there's a greater need, I'm just not of the opinion we should continue to increase rates, because most political organizations will tell you, you know, I've heard it's not a good idea not to raise rates. Well, if people don't think it's not a good idea not to raise rates, they definitely don't think it's a good idea to reduce rates. And if we're currently over-recovering on the water side, and we are correcting, and my recommendation would be to correct the under-recovering on the wastewater side, we're literally, if all goes to plan, we would be adding $700,000 a year to our net capital position. And so to say we need to go above and beyond that, to me, I personally, my conscience would not allow that.
I feel that Stephen and Carmen, this is their job, this is their careers, this is what they know what they're doing. I feel if they think that we need to go through with option number 3, then
Well, I've heard Carmen say that. Stephen, do you have a recommendation?
You gonna put me on the spot?
Well, if you prefer not to answer, I completely respect that. But I would say this, ultimately, neither Stephen nor Carmen got elected. I did. And so I will have to answer for my vote. Stephen or Carmen won't step in for me.
I think all I can do is present you with the numbers that we have in front of us, as I did. Let you know what we have in reserves, and let you know that best case scenario, as you asked earlier, if everything went great, we had no wet summer next year, and everything went great, would we have enough? Yes, but everything has to go according to plan. And like you said, there's no crystal ball to say you're perfect on it. We know this is the budget. You know, we do the best we can. We try to be conservative in our projections for next year. We know there's some stuff coming up from Fort Worth with the costs and the true up, and that's what worries me the most is we've hit our peak this year. Even if we have a good summer next year, will we hit the peak again? Will we run into the same issue? I mean, it's kind of a downfall. You know, we sell more water, we hit our projections, but then we turn around and get higher rates, and that's something we're going to run into. As a finance side, like I said, the CPI has gone up this year. You know, we're looking at what, 1%, less than 1%. Going up compared to the 3.9. So something you can look into is, you know, do I think it's reasonable and justifiable? I do. I wouldn't go minimum than option number 2. I do at least believe that wastewater should cover themselves. I can back that 100%. It gets a little more gray when you go to option number 3, and I'm glad I'm not in that chair right now.
It's gonna be a long night.
I had a cookie.
One reminder that the board will always have the opportunity to amend the budget. So it's, I would strongly recommend the board take action today. By the end of this month, you have an obligation to furnish the county with the tax rates for this current 2018 tax year. You know, your fiscal year commences October 1, and you will have the flexibility to amend your budget at any time when we have a full board here in case you want to get their input on the issue. Obviously, if you take actions with respect to your water or sewer rates tonight, you try to minimize the number of changes when you do that. But you will have the opportunity to revisit the budget if you're so inclined.
And we also know, and it's been posted just recently, that whatever the outcome of tonight's actions here relative to our budget, that we will be delivering that tomorrow morning to our friends at the town who have to work out the PID assessments based on whatever choices are made here. So I think they posted that for, is it a week from today? Week from tomorrow. Week from tomorrow.
They have a public hearing on the 24th, I believe it is. I can pull it up and look.
So, there are no other comments? I'm sorry?
Well, is there a way to
Director
do
Haslett.
a special meeting and wait for the other two directors? Or does it have to be done tonight?
Timing for the town, it's pretty important. You know, they're kind of working against their schedule. I think they meet twice a month, and they have to establish the PID assessments. There's a lot of details that go into that that go over my head, actually, but relative to that, they're planning on doing those calculations tomorrow based on the decisions that are made here tonight.
Their public hearing is on the 25th at 7 PM. And I don't believe Stiefling gets back until when? The 24th?
Tony, you can chime in a little bit. We haven't, I mean, just to answer Ms. Castaway's question, they have until the end of the month, correct? Without legal issues or?
With respect to furnishing the tax rates to the county, that needs to be done by September 30th.
So as I look at the difference between option 2 and option 3, the only difference is a $1 increase in the base rate on water and the base rate on sewer per customer.
It's about $80,000 or so.
It's $1, per customer, it would be $2 a month.
That's just on the water side. So the dollar
No,
for the
there's a,
wastewater
no,
is-
no, it's $1, the
He's
the
just
$1,
talking on
in-
the
the
water
one-
side.
no, the increased rate structure, we added $1 on the base rate in the sewer per presentation, and $1 on the base rate for water, right? That's a total of $2.
Although the sewer
But
one is
it's
included
in-
in option 2.
Correct. That's what I was gonna say. So you're
Okay.
only
So
looking at
if you
So-
dollar
go
for
from
the
2 to
water.
3, you're literally
So-
only talking
so-
about,
So the $1 was also, I thought the 2 was just balancing the rates. Was the $1 increase included in sewer on 2 and not in 1?
one is no changes to the rates
So-
at
No,
all.
no, no. Option 2. I'm talking option 2 here.
Which is option 1 for you, Chris. Yes. So the dollar's already in the base rate there. And then that's how he had to take the allocation between the residential and commercial also with it.
Okay,
So, in my numbers, in balancing sewer, that does take the dollar into account. You've got to raise it the dollar, so budget option 2 includes $1 on the sewer charge.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So so if you're satisfied with option 2, the increase in option 3 would be $1 additional per month per customer
Correct. For a 5/8 inch customer.
for a 5/8 inch customer.
That's correct. So
And
you're,
$1.88 per month for a 1-inch
For a
customer.
1-inch
And that would represent 98% of the people that are impacted.
correct,
Total between those two.
correct. I believe it's 54% at the 5/8 inch level. So,
That's correct.
And it's headed for reserves.
yes, sir.
For 88,000.
Assuming we don't have a really wet year, assuming we don't have a really dry year and you get into drought contingency situations, assuming you don't have a major pipeline break. There's a lot of assumptions that that's going to go into reserves. A lot of things can happen.
Yeah, I understand that. But if you don't have it in reserves, you don't have it. Now, granted, I will throw in and say right off the bat, there is a maximum level of reserves that is what it would be justifiable, and that's a decision that the board would make, what that number is. But talking a little bit about reserves and the research that I've done so far and everything that I've looked at on this, there is a variance, even down to the level when you talked about what should my operating reserve be? How much should my operating reserve be? And I see things from 30 days to 120 days recommended or in practice.
Well, Fitch, and if you look at Fitch's rating criteria right now, they recommend 365 days of working capital. It's all over the board in terms of what the rating agencies are saying, what AWWA is saying. And if you've looked at the recent AWWA guidance, even within that document, it's all over the map.
Yeah, I've looked at it, I've looked at the baseline, and also at GFOA.
Yes.
And so and it's in the reserve policy that I'm bringing forward tonight for some discussion, looking at a 45 minimum and a 90-day max for just the operating reserve for the organization. But here again, I couldn't tell you exactly what that number is to even get to the 45. And then there are all of these other possible factors that go into reserves, different types of reserves. I think I'm looking at 5 particular types of reserves. As you go through the documents, these things you start picking them out. And the reason you have those different items is because you could have a situation occur, A, have that problem, and have B also occur. So you need reserves capable to do both of those things simultaneously. You look at a rate stabilization reserve. We don't have anything designated as a rate stabilization reserve. So one, we have to be very conservative in our projections on our water sales, because if we have a wet year, we may not be able to carry our budget, and we don't have reserves to protect us. Once we get our rate stabilization reserve established, then we'd be able to stand a wet year, or the recommendation is 2.5 wet years that I've seen, because they seem to run in sequence or cycles, that we'd be able to stand that without modifying our reserves or without modifying our rates, and just suck down the reserves, knowing that you're going to build that rate stabilization itemized reserve back up in year 2 and 3. So it's a complicated discussion that we have to have, and I don't see that extra $1 or $1.88 as being a problem when you can justify where it's going and how it's going to be used. And that's the problem I have with our current reserve. When I say 50% on the wall, I can't tell you what it's for. And that's why I've been working for several months now to develop a reserve policy.
I guess I would,
That's it.
I would disagree with you. We know exactly what it's for. Now, we can have a debate on whether or not it should be 56% or if it should be 44. But I don't think there's anyone that's sitting here that don't know what those funds are for. And as far as it comes to putting, specifying funds within a category, if I'm reserving money for my car and my refrigerator go out, I'm not going to say, well, I'm not going to get my refrigerator fixed because I've got $1,000 reserved for my car. That would be asinine. You would transfer the money over, repair the refrigerator, and then save the additional money for your car. I mean, ultimately, that's my perspective on it. Is there any other commentary? Calling for a vote? Hearing none, so go back. We have a motion to approve 2018-0917B, approving budget for fiscal year 2019, option 3. That's the motion. Everyone understands it? All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Left, Vice President Rose, Director Castaway. All opposed? President Wilson, motion fails. I'll make my motion again. We have a motion to approve Resolution 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019, option 2. Do I have a second?
You can't second it.
I was going to make a comment. If there's time for discussion.
Motion fails due to lack of second.
I was just going to say that staff's recommendation is option 3. But if, if we had to live with another option, option 2 is the second best thing. So I guess
I was wondering about the possibility of finding the missing director and tabling this motion to to a later time in this meeting.
I got a message from him. He got Paige back from work.
Not available?
Right.
Okay.
Well, from the meeting that we had with Secretary Treasurer Flynn, I think he was more in my camp, that he thought our reserves were sufficient, and he wanted me to transport that to the board.
Would you accept a 50% increase? 50
I-
cent, not 50%, a 50-cent increase rather than a dollar?
What I would say is this: if all the things that you describe happen, if we find a way to spend $5.3 million and everything falls apart, then having another $87,000 won't help us. I mean, literally, what we're talking about is, we're talking about .03 on a $10 million budget is what we spent the last 30 minutes arguing over. Now, you could say it goes both ways, and why don't you approve it? And you'd say, well, why don't you approve it? But ultimately, if we blow through $5.3 million, I cannot envision a moment where we're all sitting here where General Manager Carmen says, man, if we just had another $87,000, all of our problems would be resolved. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I don't know how significantly this would impact the town, but one alternative would be for the board to proceed with what I think you're calling option one, and the
Option
proposed,
two.
no, option one is what I'm
Okay.
proposing. In the next 30-day period, you should have 2 additional directors at next month's meeting. You can also get the issue seems to relate to the policy decision of reserve funds and how much to fund that. You could gather additional information regarding that issue and then take up the rate issue at your next meeting. Essentially just defer consideration of any rate changes for a month, and in the meantime get additional information regarding funding decisions for reserves, and have 2 additional directors at your next meeting.
There's another consideration. And that is, we also come back and look at the rate structure in April.
Yes, that's what I was gonna remind you about. You will look at this again in April.
So if we go with option 2, we can come back and have this same discussion as it relates to option 3 or something else after we get a reserve policy on the ground. That's kind of a middle of the road deal with an agreement. Obviously, we'll have the ability to, we're going to have the rate structure back before us, and we also, when we do the rate structure, we also look at where we set on the budget in April. So basically what we're talking about now, if you look at taking that approach, is a 50%. We're going to get you'll get the $1 on the sewer, but you would not get the $1 on the water.
It was understood to be option number 2.
Yeah, that would be option number 2, would give us the $1 on the sewer. And that's where that's where a big cost is.
As well as fixing the equity issue between the rate classes on the
Yes.
sewer side.
Yeah. Can we do that?
Sure.
Look at it again in April? And we'll have, I think we'll have a reserve policy on the ground that's justifiable. Hopefully, it will be a while, but soon, as compared to not having one. And as the general manager said, when I come into an organization and you don't have an asset management plan, and you've been in operation for 40 years, it caused me to flinch. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, my motion died on the vine.
Well, make your motion again, and I think I can give you a second.
Okay, let's see if 3 times the charm. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 2018-0917B, approving the budget for fiscal year 2019, option 2.
Second.
We have a motion by President Wilson, a second by Vice President Rose. Any other comments or commentary?
We'll readdress this in April.
Hearing no other comments, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Number 7, consider and take appropriate action to adopt rate order 2018-0917A, amending water and sewer rates and setting an effective date for October 1st, 2018.
I gotta look at this.
So I just so happen to have a rate order which predicts option number 2 right there in front of you.
Yeah.
We just talked about.
But it does not include amendment of the water rate.
That is correct.
Correct.
Just threw it out there. But no, it's just strictly the sewer changes, which would be on, let me get to the page.
It is
So it'd be
on page 3 of 8.
67.
Okay, so now let's see. You gotta make a motion in this.
You want me to make the motion?
It's gonna be difficult.
Well, we can make it, trying to integrate it into that, it's gonna be a nightmare.
Well, my suggestion would be to make the motion to adopt this rate order and then come back and amend it to put those rates in it.
Or we make the motion to approve these and modify this with these rates, and then we can do it in one.
Isn't it in there?
I don't know what he's asking.
I'm sorry, I thought I understood, Stephen, the rate order we have prepared reflects option number 2.
That is correct.
So it's all correct then.
That is correct.
It's all ready
It's
to
got
go.
the current water rates and it's got the updated sewer rates for the base charge and the volumetric and the commercial. It should be exactly option number 2.
All right, need to validate that.
Yeah, that's what I was about to do.
So that should be on 67 of the packet.
Okay, because 67 has no change in the water. That's what we were talking about. No change in the base rate on the water, right?
Correct.
460. Yes, it matches.
Okay. It has adjustments, or does it not have adjustments on the volumetric rates?
It has it for the sewer, not for the water. So if you,
So what we're saying is we're leaving the water the same? Water rates stay stable again, okay?
This rate order reflects the option number 2.
Okay. 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 Did you make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I make a motion to adopt rate order number 2018-0917A, amending the water and sewer rates and setting the effective date of October 1st for the order as presented.
I'll second.
Motion's presented by President Wilson, seconded by Vice President Rose. Any other questions or comments?
I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm on section 1.10 on page 64 of the packet. Give you a chance to get there. This,
Sorry, you said amending water and sewer rates. You're just amending sewer rates.
well, the rate order affects,
rate order
even though it
affects both.
doesn't, it affects both.
Is your question related to the,
Yep, the Fort Worth impact fee, section 1.10 says effective through March 31st, 2017, and then has a set of fees. And then it goes down, below that says City of Fort Worth ordinance such and such effective April 1st, 2017. I wonder if there's a reason that we retain that, and that information, that old rate information in here.
Stephen, what's the reason, Stephen?
The old information?
Yes.
yeah, for,
We'll amend it and we'll bring the amended rate order back for signature and take that section
Okay,
out.
well, I was gonna make a motion to delete it.
Yes, remove that section.
So all
Um,
1.1?
No,
Yeah.
I'll get it.
I just wanted to contribute that when the decision was made in Fort Worth to up the impact fees for people living in the wholesale communities, both water and sewer, we don't pay their sewer impact fee because we have our own treatment system. That was scheduled to happen over a 3-year period. So I'm not clear that it didn't actually go up this March.
So if you look, if you
March
go
of
down
18.
to page 65, you have a
There's
schedule
another,
there
there's
based on
another
the
scale in there.
years.
See,
yeah.
it's
Now,
got this,
as
it's in
far
there.
as my understanding, I was in that Fort Worth class.
Eat this.
If somebody
Yeah, for 2020.
had submitted prior to that date, though, they aren't subject to this calculator here.
Their property was platted before a
Yes.
certain date.
Yeah.
So
Their
all has to do
impact
with plat
fee
date now.
stayed What it was through March 2017. Anything like platted after that went to the
So
tiered
if,
rates.
okay, so if it was platted prior to the date in the first
And I don't know-
section,
Yeah, anything
I
prior
don't
to that
remember what the
March.
date was. They put a date in there, and I don't remember what.
Well,
the
that has to
date-
do with prior to April 1st, 2017, which is in here, the
Okay.
prior way. So anything before that goes back on the old system. This is going forward, the calculator. Anything after that.
okay, so my question is, can I remove the first paragraph and also the first chart?
I mean, if my understanding, could stuff still be platted and not metered, right? I mean, that could still possibly happen.
I'm going to suggest an alternative which may help the district going forward, which is, can the entire section be essentially the first sentence, get rid of the effective through, so that it just reads, each customer requesting an initial connection to the district's water system shall also pay to the district a pass-through fee for the applicable City of Fort Worth impact fee, period. So every time they change it, you never have to amend your rate order each time.
That makes sense.
I was gonna say, I second what Tony said.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
It
does.
does make sense.
Okay.
Do you want to make that modification?
Yeah, I'm gonna do this. And that would make both of those charts and everything go away. And so what you said was,
We're not moving the chart.
You can't remove the second chart. That has to stay
It was
there.
here.
I thought we were just removing the date
Yeah,
from the very beginning,
well-
effective.
No,
Wait a minute.
we're
The
removing the
first
chart.
date, so that-
Whatever the applicable fee, it is what it is.
Yeah, without having to list it, because you're saying,
oh, can we do that in our rate order?
Well, if you do this, because the impact fee that's assessed is based on the data subdivision plating, if you try to include the tables here, you're gonna have to include every table for the history of Fort Worth from the first plat recorded in the district to the current time. No.
She wants to come
I'm,
up and
I'm sorry, you got to come forward.
let me
Announce your name and address again, just in case.
Luann Wing, 1115 Wilshire Drive. So then are you saying, depending on where your plat, that the rate is variable, or is it consistent?
It's, I'm not sure what you mean by variable. Under Chapter 395 of the Local Government Code, the impact fee that's assessed is based on the date of final subdivision, plating of the subdivision.
Okay, so it can be, the rate can be different by subdivision is what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay, so how would I, as a citizen, then know or understand what my rate is? And maybe make a buying decision based on,
If you're already a citizen, it wouldn't apply to you.
okay. Okay, but if I'm coming in from California and looking to buy in a given subdivision, and I want to know what my rate is, how do I find out what my rate's going to be?
This is really associated with a new meter connection on a new piece of property. So you're not buying a house, you're buying a piece of land and trying to connect it to the water system.
Right,
There's a fee during that development process that we charge and pass through to Fort Worth to reflect the impacts on, you know, their overall treatment costs, their transport costs to get water to us. So it's affected by that.
They said it.
But to answer your question, you would have to know the date of subdivision, plating of your subdivision. And so even if we had the tables listed, that wouldn't answer it because the person would have to look at the date of subdivision plating. And if they know that date, then they can find the answer from Fort Worth in any event.
okay.
I'm
Alright.
concerned if we have tables, we may end up with 25 different tables.
Or we should have more tables
Oh,
than
we
what we
should
have.
have, yeah.
But
Okay.
that's something that can be obtained
Well, the,
from Fort Worth.
the plat date only came into effect.
Certainly,
in
we're
after
obligated
April,
by our
though,
contract with
going
Fort
forward.
Worth to collect that fee in the appropriate amount under their ordinance and pass it through to them. In fact, I think we're getting audited on that later this week to make sure, they want to make sure that we've collected the appropriate fees on their behalf.
Yeah, so when we had the meeting back in, I want to say right before April last year, the impact fee plat date only came into effect after that meeting. So anything before that wouldn't go off the plat date. We never had to collect a plat date before.
Right, so that's why it's worded.
This is
like
something new after April that took effect.
No, I'm saying, so if there was, and I don't know if this applies to you, if there was a subdivision that was platted in 1984, and there's an undeveloped lot within that, the maximum impact fee assessed at that time would apply to that lot when it walks in the door tomorrow.
That is correct, and, you know, I believe that 1989 was the first year that Fort Worth even assessed I could be off on that, but that's my recollection. 1989 was the first time they assessed an impact fee.
Most of your subdivisions are residential. I suspect they're fully platted and fully built out.
platted within.
But they could always go back and replat or something happened. They could always go back and
If
issue
the,
another one if they
if
want
the
to.
number of service units increases, then you can go back and collect another impact fee. If the number of service units doesn't change, then replatting wouldn't affect the impact fee.
Correct.
Okay, so if I understood your sentence correctly, and follow me through, we could delete all of this in this section except say, each customer requesting an initial connection to the district's water system shall also pay to the district a City of Fort Worth required pass-through impact fee as established by the City of Fort Worth.
I would say use the word applicable just to,
Where did you put applicable?
under the sentence you just said, shall also pay the applicable City of Fort Worth impact fee as established by the City of Fort Worth. If you wanted to provide more clarity to your
Okay, wait a minute.
customers, you could reference platting, but
Okay, let's not do that.
Pay the required, the applicable
Okay.
pass-through impact.
Yeah, all right. All right, okay. So I move to amend the rate order, section 1.10, to read section 1.10, Fort Worth impact fee. Each customer requesting a connection to the district's water system shall also pay, come up here, shall also pay to the district wait a minute, shall also pay to the district, where's the applicable going
Yeah,
in there?
a City of Fort Worth applicable pass-through
Okay,
impact
required,
fee.
okay, got it. We'll start over. Each customer requesting an initial connection to the district's water system shall also pay to the district, a City of Fort Worth.
I would say the applicable pass-through fee for the city of Fort Worth's impact fee or the city of Fort Worth's applicable impact fee. Either way would work. One comment, Bill?
I can't work in the computer and do it. It's not a Word document. I can do this. So go ahead. If you want to say it, go ahead and I'll make my motion what you say.
One comment first, which is I don't believe this has been adopted yet.
No,
So you started to make a motion regarding amendment?
it's an amendment.
So you need to
We have
amend my
amendment.
motion.
We have an amendment. We have a motion on the floor. Okay,
Oh,
to
it is
adopt
on the
this.
floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm doing an amendment,
Amendment to that motion.
To the motion, okay.
and you're going to make the
Okay,
amendment.
so what I have is each customer connecting to the district's water system shall also pay the applicable pass-through fee to the city of Fort Worth.
Not to the city of.
Section 1.10. Is that what you said?
No, each customer requesting an initial connection to the district's water system shall also pay to the district
To the district, okay?
I'm going to propose to make it even more simple, which is the applicable city of Fort Worth impact fee.
That's what I just looked at, yeah.
How about the appropriate?
The applicable
The applicable City of Fort
shall
Worth.
also,
Shall
shall
also pay to the district.
also pay to the district the applicable city of Fort Worth impact fee.
That's good. That's good. And that will delete the verbiage. And the two charts and the tables.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you made the motion to modify. Are you comfortable? Do you second that modification?
Are we okay with this? Do we have to weren't we told we have to put this in our rate order by the city of Fort Worth? Because we have to calculate that fee and assess it to the customer when they walk through the door. That's the issue here.
There's a calculator that, based on the plat fee, we do, when we do it through a calculator. We actually, going forward, anybody comes in, any customer comes in, they ask us, what's the rate? They really don't even look at this, honestly.
No, you're absolutely going to have to determine what is the applicable fee in each instance, always.
And it changes, as you can see, as the years go by. Fort Worth is making changes. I mean, we have a calculator that's updated every year that I get from Fort Worth, and we plug it in. So we put in there, it's, just a pass through from
Then we're
Fort Worth
good.
to Fort Worth, and we'll be fine.
Okay.
But we have
I
to
just
relate to the
wanted to make
customer
sure.
before they go any further.
You,
anyway.
you will always have to make that determination. And when an applicant comes in for service, you'll have to look at what property they're seeking service for, when it was platted, and based on that, you will make a decision of what is the applicable impact fee to collect and pass through.
Okay.
And it's safe for us to do a general statement in the rate order as opposed to a specific amount.
Yeah, just legally, to be clear, you do not have the authority to establish an impact fee, you, the district, without going through the 395 process. This is a city of Fort Worth adopted fee. By contract under your wholesale agreement, you're agreeing to collect their fee and pass it through to them. So if this was a district fee that you were establishing, then we would specify it. But this is a pass-through of a Fort Worth fee.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
We never
Okay,
had to pass
so I'll go through the motion
Can I,
again.
can I ask
wait.
a question real quick? Sorry.
Yeah.
Are we gonna leave pass-through? I mean, that's something we need to leave?
The word
Show this as
pass-through, should we put
pass-through
that through in
of
there?
Fort Worth?
It's the applicable, if you want to communicate to your residents that it's a pass-through, you can do so, but by contract, the district is obligated to collect and remit to the city their impact fee.
We're calling it an impact fee. Okay, we're good.
There's no harm in doing so, but it's not legally required.
Okay, I'll repeat the motion. The motion is to adopt the rate order 2018-09178, amending the water and sewer.
We have to vote on the amendment first.
I was gonna summarize all, and then I was gonna put that on there, so. Okay, well, let's vote first on the modification to the amendment. I was gonna read it all and add that. Any other, everyone understand what the
Amendment.
amendment is to the initial motion? All right, all in favor indicate by raising your hand.
Now,
The amendment passes. We'll go back to the original motion, which was to adopt rate order number 2017-09178, amending the water and sewer rates and setting an effective date of October 1st, 2018,
as amended now.
as amended.
Yep, ready to vote.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, everyone, if you're in favor, indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
My apologies to the board.
It's not accepted. Okay, item number 8, consider and take appropriate action regarding order number 2018-0917B, fixing and levying Trophy Club Municipal Utility District 1 debt service tax rate and operations and maintenance tax rate for 2018 tax year.
Guess I'll talk about that one. So in the budget that we have here, I have updated the the calculation of taxes that we have. The debt service tax comes out to 0.04134 taxable of each $100 value, and then the O&M comes out to, it's broken down. O&M general fund is 0.00766, and our fire is also included in that, the 0.06719, for a total O&M of 0.07484 of each $100 taxable value. And that gives us, yes,
I have a
Shouldn't it
question.
be 2019?
tax year is 18.
Yeah, Texas and Texas are set in arrears.
Yeah.
I have a question on the motion. Trying to recall from when I've seen these done before. There's always, the motion always includes the tax rates. Do I have to reach back and get the fire tax rates also?
No, I think you're thinking of certain types of taxing units. The motion must specify the actual dollar amount of rates. That's not applicable to municipal utility districts.
Oh, good. In that case,
The fire tax is actually embedded in this maintenance.
That's correct. I just wanted to
Yeah.
specify and break it out for you. so
I
you can see.
I just remember watching the dance before and the way it was done. Okay, I move to approve order number 2018-0917B, levying debt service and maintenance taxes for the 2018 tax year.
And I have a motion by Vice President Rose. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
You resigned.
Yes. Okay, the motion has been seconded. Any commentary? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have item number 9. Consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of district information form, including notice of purchaser form.
Yeah, I'll take this one too while we're at it. So this shows that the updated tax rate now for mix of both is 0.11618 per $100 assessed valuation. Then below is also the notice of purchaser that was updated for any future residents here. Scroll down to it.
These are also filed with the counties. I file them personally with each county.
And this rate obviously stays under our max rollback rate, which is what we addressed before.
I have a question on this form, and I'm on page, come on, 81. I was wondering if this particular form is set by state statutes or verbiage or something, because in paragraph 2, the last sentence says, by law, a district located wholly in 2 or more municipalities and in unincorporated area may be abolished by agreement between the district and all of the municipalities in which parts of the district are located and without the consent of the voters of the district. To me, that statement is either an oversimplification or misinformation, because you can't execute that until all of the GO bonds are paid, as I understand it.
There's a couple of things in what you just said, so I'll try to address each of them. The first is you asked if the form of the notice to purchase is specified by statute, and the answer to that is yes. It's set forth in Chapter 49 of the Water Code, and there's alternative forms according to whether or not a district is located within an ETJ of a city, within the corporate boundaries of a city, or outside of both the corporate boundaries and the ETJ of a city. In this case, the district falls within the category of notice to purchasers that within the corporate boundaries of the city. The statutory form provides that a district located in the corporate boundaries of a municipality may be annexed by the municipality without the consent of the district voters. That's the statutory form. That same statute authorizes a district to correct any inaccuracy as it applies to the district. In your case, the district is uniquely within the corporate boundaries of 2 municipalities and has property outside of both municipalities. So it's unique in that sense. The statement that's included in this notice to purchaser form is a copy of a provision within the local government code that applies to the dissolution of MUDs that are located within 2 or more municipalities and that include property outside the boundaries of both municipalities. So as far as it goes, it's an accurate statement as to the statute within the local government code.
Okay.
So
Even though,
probably more than you.
yes.
so the answer is yes, but the functionality of it is no, because you can't do it until you.
And let me. That's I guess part 2 of your question. We previously discussed whether it was viable legally for the district to exclude from its corporate boundaries the lands that were within Westlake. And at that time, I told the board that if a district has outstanding bonds payable from taxes, the water code prohibits the exclusion
Yes.
of lands from your corporate boundaries because it potentially impairs your debt service obligations to your bondholders. So the answer to that is no. This doesn't relate to the exclusion of property. This relates to the dissolution of the district.
Okay.
So kind of different issue.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree.
I'll watch the video again. I'll get it a second time around on the video.
Before you approve that, would you like to make note that the rate is decreasing 0.00151%? Not particularly? Well, I did it for you.
I'm waiting for somebody to make a motion on this.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the amendment to district information form, including the purchaser notice as presented, with a rate of 0.011618. That's the total tax rate. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Second by Director Castaway. Any other questions or comments? Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 10, consider and take appropriate action regarding adoption of Resolution 2018-0917C, approving fiscal year 2018 tax roll for Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1.
I'll take this one too. What you have here in front of you is what's been updated. Here's our current numbers and what has been approved and certified. We got Denton counties in July 20th. We got Denton counties in July 14th. We got Tarrant County certified in July 20th. These are the listed appraisal values here in front of you. And it also gives you the tax rate again per $100 assessed.
Okay, I make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-0917C, approving the fiscal year 2018 tax roll for Trophy Club Mud 1 of a assessed rate of 0.11618 on the property values as listed in the amendment, a resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Vice President Rose. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 11, consider and take appropriate action regarding annual review of district's investment policy and investment strategy, including appointing district investment officers, and order number 2018-0917C, adopting the amended and restated investment policy.
Real quickly, the board under the Public Funds Investment Act is required annually to conduct a review of its investment policy and written investment strategies. Last year, you may recall that some revisions were made to the policy to reflect some legislative changes. I believe that there are no proposed changes by staff with respect to your current investment policy, so the board would just be readopting its investment policy from prior years. It looks like perhaps there was a change, which I'll let Stephen mention in a minute. I'm not aware of one. Depending on what the board does with respect to the reserve fund issues, the result of that may be that the board creates or establishes additional funds. Depending on that, we may recommend that the board therefore amend this policy to adopt investment strategies relating to any new funds that it may create. So that's just a comment that we may bring this back to you depending on the outcome of that deliberation.
Okay.
Stephen, was there a change? I'm sorry.
Correct. We did remove Bank of the West off of here.
Oh.
We actually just closed the account down here, so that is no longer part of our investments or diversification. So we are now solely going through Prosperity and Texpool, and then we have stuff through First Financial for this capital.
That looks like it's on Exhibit C, which is page 102 of your packets.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
I don't think you are. I move to approve order number 2018-0919C, adopting the amended and reinstated investment policy.
Restated.
Restated.
We have a motion to approve the order number 2018-0917C, adopting the amended and restated investment policy. Do I have a second? I'll second that. We have a motion that's been presented and seconded. Any discussion?
I would like to make an amendment. On page 92, section 7.02. In the, everybody there?
Section what?
7.02.
Investment training.
Investment training. I move to delete board-appointed treasurer in sentence number 1 in section 702 and treasurer in sentence 2 of section 7.02. If I get a second, I'll talk to it.
I'll second it.
Okay, when we did the bylaws for the organization, one of the things that the treasurer, and I was treasurer at the time, one of the things that the treasurer was required to be was an investment officer. And that the board at that time looked at the situation, overall picture, and decided that it was not necessary or desired that the treasurer, the board treasurer, be an investment officer, that responsibility should fall to the general manager and the finance manager. And so that was the action that was taken at that time. We did not bring back the investment policy at that time to align it with the bylaws. So the purpose of my motion is to align the investment policy with the bylaws where the treasurer would not be required to take investment training. There is a small financial savings.
Can I speak for that?
Sure.
What I would like to say is, we are a small entity here, and Carmen and I have had a discussion about this. The general manager should be an investment officer. I don't agree that the finance manager should be the investment officer for checks and balance reasoning on what we have here. And if something was to happen and the general manager was gone for a week, we need to have a capability of an investment officer on hand. If we had a capability of somebody on the board, say a treasurer, I was able to reach out to if we need to move any funds or do anything that went with investment policy-wise. So it gives us a secondary person in case the sole person as the investment officer was incapable or gone for a week or so. And that's my reasoning for keeping it here.
The only person that's carried as an investment officer is yourself?
As of right now, that's my understanding. However, we've also in that set of bylaws was a requirement that I have a board-approved acting general manager that had got submitted when it was selected. That person is Mike McMahon, but I don't know that Mike has been through PFIA training.
Yeah, that would create an issue.
Yeah.
So,
And the problem with it, so we actually have two problems, because right now, I don't think the current treasurer, you went through the training, he did.
No.
No,
I didn't. He has.
He has?
he has not yet.
I
He has
don't
not.
think
It hasn't been local yet. They only come around certain times of the year, so we haven't set them up yet.
So he's not had to train.
No, Director Flynn is open to going to it, and I'll have to redo my course. You have 2 years to go in and do a refresher course, a one-day course part. So we'll try to get that scheduled together here. I think there's a couple coming up in November, December this year. But Carmen and I spoke about it. I think it's good to have a secondary investment officer, and I don't believe the finance manager should be that person.
Okay. So that would require, well, this talks about training. I'd have to go back up in another section where it talks about who the investment, well, I guess it's just
To be
a
an investment
paragraph.
officer, you must go through this
Okay,
training.
so
It is
the
required.
7.01 says the person serving as GM is hereby appointed as investment officer. So even the treasurer, secretary treasurer of the board isn't carried as an investment officer here. That's the way I read it. Delegation of appointment of investment officer in 701 says the general manager. Doesn't say the general manager and the secretary of the board. We took it, originally the secretary treasurer was an investment officer, and the previous board said no.
Correct.
And so here again, you're not you're not an investment officer, but you have taken the training,
Correct.
and that's as required here, training. So the question before the board is, do you want to have a member of the board to also have the training? That's basically the question.
I mean, legally, and Tony can probably jump into this, I think, you know, in bigger entities, big municipalities, the finance manager is also the investment officer in most cases, but, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out having, maybe it's something I need to reach out to the auditor about, but having a checks and balance, having something in place, so it isn't solely on one person.
The investment officer designated by the board is the individual required to undertake the investment training, if that's your question, which may or may not be a board member.
Well, yeah, I understand that. The question is do we have more than one investment officer?
That's a policy
That's a- yeah.
decision for you guys. My interpretation of your existing policy is the same as yours, that for whatever reason, only the GM is designated as the investment officer, but the board wanted to make sure certain individuals receive the training to be familiar with the
Yeah.
Public Funds Investment Act, and that would include the board treasurer,